I'm Jess from BFI Network. Welcome to the latest instalment in our new BFI Network live webinar series. This is our 7th webinar to date. We've 2 more webinars coming up this week. Tomorrow we have one hosted by our friends at Film Hub Southeast with Anna Burtmark and Will McGregor. They'll be looking at sound design. And another later in the week on Thursday with Rachel Durance, which is hosted by Film Hub Southwest, BAFTA and Channel 4 as part of our Short It Out initiative. You can find details on how to register for those on the BFI Network website. We're recording all these sessions and I'll make them available online shortly. I know lots of people have been asking us about them and we're being a bit slow to get them up, but we have found a solution, so hopefully they'll be up and available to view later this week. If you haven't joined us for one of these online events before, I'll just point out a few key things that should make your experience a little bit more interactive. On your screen, you'll see a chat box where you can talk to one another. Please be sure to set your settings within the chat box to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your comments and not just the panel. Otherwise, it just looks like we've got these strange random comments appearing that have no context, no questions. There's also a Q&A box where you can type in questions that you'd like to ask the panelists. This is your opportunity to really ask burning questions, so do please feel free to engage fully there. There's an option to keep questions anonymous if you'd like to do that. Just one small caveat there, we do usually get lots of questions, so sadly we won't be able to get to every single one, but we will answer as many as we can in the time that we have available today. So this webinar today is going to be hosted by Rachel Durance. She's an emerging editor, an experienced assistant editor who's worked on a wide range of award-winning short films, including her work on the Short Flicks series for Sky Arts. Rachel has also edited a number of network-funded short films and worked with some really brilliant emerging directors. As well as her work editing, Rachel has been a hugely successful assistant editor with credits including Sorry We Missed You and Yesterday. Rachel's going to be chatting to her friend and mentor, the editor Chris Tellefsen, who she met when they worked together on Assassin's Creed. We're really excited to have Chris zooming in today from New York. It's morning there for Chris, but afternoon here for us, so a bit of a time difference for us. Chris has worked with some of the finest writers and directors on critically acclaimed films such as Gummo, Smoke, and Larry Clark's Kids. In 2011, Chris was nominated for an Oscar for his work on the hit movie Moneyball. And recently he worked on the hit thriller A Quiet Place for actor-director John Krasinski, and he's currently editing the upcoming film The Many Saints of Newark, the highly anticipated Sopranos prequel, which I'm really, really excited about. So I'm going to disappear now, and I'm going to hand you over to our amazing host today, Rachel. Hi, Rachel. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
Really well. I'm going to stop my video and mute myself so that you two can get chatting.
Cool. All right, thanks, Jess. Great, well, hi everyone. Just want to say big thanks to Chris for being here and taking the time to chat with me today. It's really kind of him. So yeah, basically I'm gonna ask some sort of specific questions about certain scenes that I'm interested in, and we'll talk about sort of Chris's career as a whole. And then sort of towards the end of the chat, we'll open it up to questions from you guys. So I thought I'd start by asking you some questions about your sort of early career, as a lot of people sort of watching will be kind of starting up in their careers. So I know you studied at art school as opposed to film school. So I was just kind of wondering what first drew you to editing, what sort of specifics about it, and have you always sort of gravitated towards storytelling in some kind of form?
Well, actually, Rachel, my initial thing was always visual, and I went to arts. I was like very obsessive, and that was where I was at. And I tried many mediums, but I never really felt like I had one specific thing that I felt really absolutely totally focused on. And I'd always been obsessive about movies. I've been watching them since childhood, and in my second, third year of school, I took an experimental film and animation class with Robert Greer, a wonderful artist and filmmaker and animator, who really opened up a lot to me. And I made these collage films, which I would shoot off of a Bolex, off of the television. I had made these collage films that were very mixed with it. I would look through TV Guide, finding films that I really, really liked, and knowing even shots that I kind of wanted to play with, and then mixed it with science programs and Spanish soap operas, and they were really quite fun, and it was something that I just got very charged about, and it really brought my mind to things that I remembered even as a child. I used to watch the 4:30 movie in the afternoon back coming home from school. There was a movie on every day at 4:30, and they're mostly classic Hollywood, and I would watch it every day, and it was a 2-hour format, and during some years later it changed to a 90-minute format. And without really thinking about it, I would see films that I'd seen with a half an hour excised from them. And I literally thought I would sit at night and think about how different they felt and the context of things shifting so much. And that was something that just like picked up in my brain when I was just like putting images together and getting excited about that as something I just had a feel for, had an instinct for. And then I just pursued it very, very, very aggressively, but I came out of absolutely nowhere, no film school, no nothing. It was like going to the moon, getting a job of that sort. But certain things that help, just to give you a little context. A guy who I knew who was teaching at the Henry Street Settlement, but also knew some of the experimental work that I was doing, suggested me for Rye TV was doing these like this thing called Top New York. It was like these little documentaries that were like about eccentric things that Americans were doing at the time. There was something about the Zulu Nation and rap music. There was one about survivalists, and I was doing this, and for 1 year I did this, and I was so excited. It was really, really a great thing to do. They were little documentaries, things that weren't more than 10 minutes. And then they just disappeared because the Italians, like once the arts were connected to politics, and once there was a different leader, everybody was out. So it was suddenly gone, and I was just bereft. So then I tried to get jobs as an assistant from there, and managed to get onto this film, a terrible film called The Stroke of Genius that Jackie Mason was in. And it was just, it was dreadful, absolutely dreadful. And it was a big mess too. Financially, they were, oh my God, they were bouncing checks left and right. We were stuck in Florida. The assistant that was in New York that was getting the stuff, he ransomed the film because he wasn't getting paid. It was a real mess. And then the editor was sort of fired, quit, and then they knew that I had some experience, and they just asked me to do a pass on the film. And I did pass on the film. It was just unbelievably bad. And then they just disappeared. They came back a year later, and they had another film which was directed by actually a famous editor, Ralph Rosenblum, who wrote the book When the Shooting Stops, which I highly recommend, When the Shooting Stops by Ralph Rosenblum. And he edited all of Woody Allen's films up to Interiors. He did many of the Sidney Lumet films, famous for comedy, basically. Like he edited The Producers, which is like classic, gorgeous. And so when they came back, they asked me to come and under Ralph's supervision do another pass on the other film. And I boiled it down to like 40 minutes, and Ralph really responded and liked what I was doing. But also the film that he had directed, which was not very good, was called Stiffs, about a group of brothers who inherit a funeral parlor, and it was pretty dopey. It was not great. But the editor of it was Sonia Polanski, who I made friends with, and Sonia edited the John Sayles films Baby It's You and Mate One, and was the first assistant on Raging Bull, and had her connection with Thelma and with Woodstock. And okay. Thelma, actually, she said on Raging Bull, she went from youth to middle age. But that connection got me connected to Marty Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker, and I begged a job as an apprentice editor on The Color of Money. Worked on that and worked on Marty's archive for about 6 months, and then I got very frustrated. I was overlooked for the next film, which was The Last Temptation of Christ. And then I just said, I don't want to assist. I have great respect for assistant work. It's a great profession, but it wasn't what my focus was. So I ended up editing a short for a small company called Apparatus Films, which was this nonprofit company that was producing short films, which it's sort of in a way like what you've been doing with the BFI, which is wonderful. But that was a rarity, and there hasn't been another company like that in a long, long time. But I edited a wonderful short called Muddy Hands. The writer-director was a guy named Evan Dunsky, who went on to create Nurse Jackie. And that got into a lot of festivals, and it got me a little notice. I got a really funky little independent film called Revolution, which was like a loosely based on the Godard film Bande Apart, but it was a musical. And the short got me the attention of a line producer, Brian Greenbaum, who was working with Stillman on Metropolitan, and suggested me to meet with him. They were 2 weeks into shooting, and we met, and I read the script, and it was like so unusual, so different, you know, and also to make a low budget film about high budget people was very unusual, very fresh. Yeah. And that's when that started, and it kind of went from there. That's like, in a nutshell.
Yeah, the sort of the beginnings of your career.
Trajectory.
Yeah. So,
door.
Yeah. So as someone who's also sort of, I went to art school, I never went to film school or anything like that. So I kind of learned on the job as well. And I think something that I found is, you know, going from a sort of arts-based background, you're sort of working on your own quite a lot. You know, like you said, doing like collages, you know, I did a lot of video projection for theatre and things like that. And that's kind of where I sort of found my love of editing. I just wondered like how you found going from working solo to having this kind of hugely collaborative process, because that's definitely something that like has been a real learning curve for me.
It wasn't, I didn't find it difficult. I kind of, it was interesting. I mean, I was so hungry, you know, I was just so hungry and wanted it so bad that it was just like, I just sort of navigated it as best I could. And, you know, I've worked with a lot of different people, and every time is every new experience, and working with a new, whether it be a writer, director, or a director, is always a whole new experience. And you have to kind of, there's a lot of psychology involved. There's a lot of, but the main thing is that you're coming into it with great wish to create the intention of what this piece is. And whenever I read a script before I have a meeting. I read it like 2 to 3 times, make massive notes, and really just try and get a sense in my first meeting of what the intention, what is the wish of this, what is the purpose of this. And that always kind of creates a fruition and something that comes together. And I just like give like 300% towards, you know, finding that. And all of the process that goes with it. And I love process, and I've always loved that aspect of it.
Yeah, the kind of like bits before the end. Yeah, it's such a beautiful process.
Yeah, and the evolution of and the navigation, and I really love when a director really challenges me and gives me inspiration to try different things and then experiment as well, which I'll do anyway, but then get another perspective. That's always wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, so you touched on sort of getting your job on Metropolitan. So I was just kind of wondering what you sort of touched on it a little bit, but your first kind of thoughts on the script were. Did you sort of feel like this is a really special project, like from the output, or was this kind of something that evolved as you were making it, or just wondered if you could touch on that?
I'll say when I went to meet when I first read it, I was very impressed with how different it was, how kind of fresh and in a way odd it was. And it was a little like it had a quite kind of a conservative bent, which kind of I thought about. And also when I came to the set and saw this group of people that were these young people, and like group of some who had acting experience, many who had none. And they just felt like a group of people that knew one another. They just felt very organic and very right. And from there, it was a matter of it just felt very solid. It had a solidity to it that was very refreshing and exciting too. Yes. Did I think at first that it was going to be like such a hit? That's hard to say. I had great faith in it, but we had early screenings where, I mean, someone that I had worked with like came to us an early screening, you know, like a flatbed screening, and was like, you know, well, you know, I don't know if these personal films are going anywhere. Maybe you should do exploitation. But I had faith in it. And then some people were like, wow, this is interesting. And I felt very strongly about it. And Whit felt very strongly about it. And when we first actually had one of our earliest like screenings for a festival person, it was someone from the Montreal Film Festival, and this woman hated it. I mean, she really disliked it. And we were devastated. We were so upset. Yeah. And yeah. Then when the IFC people came to see it before there was going to be this little festival, we were like really nervous, and but they really loved it. And then we got Ira Deutschman, who was with New Line Cinema, came to see it, and he became the producer's rep. And for that, by the time it was screening at the IFC festival thing, it was going through the roof, and there were lines around the block. It was very exciting. And then it was picked up, and then it did very well at Sundance. It did very well at Cannes. And I used to go, and the theater at the Paris Theater, there were lines down the street, and it was very exciting. But yeah, and people wanted to like it. And part of the experience of it was, and I felt my responsibility was to help make it this like very attractive thing. It needed, and we worked very hard on making, like, with no money. It was $235,000 budget. Wow. with a 35 millimeter blow up. And that was tough, but we really got through it. But we had to make it very, very real and very fresh and attractive.
So do you think when you sort of went on set and you kind of saw the dynamics between the sort of non-actors, as it were, or sort of very sort of fresh actors, do you think that actually helped you in the edit at all, just to kind of come up with,
Yes, definitely. That was, and there was an element of, you know, like it just had a freshness. And they what's also interesting is they didn't really understand a lot of the context of things, but they had a sort of like a callow freshness, like it was interesting. It was very interesting and fun.
Yeah, I think for such an ensemble piece, it's so nice because you sort of let the dialogue breathe quite a bit. And I think for, you know, a lot of new editors, you know, with a lot of the technologies that we're using now, it's very fast paced. And I would just, you know, I think maybe some editors coming up might have a tendency to potentially overcut a scene on something like that. So I was just wondering, like, if maybe you could talk a bit about your thoughts on that, and like what kind of, I don't know, your kind of like approach to that. Do you ever have that in mind, not to overcut something, or is it just sort of an instinctual thing to the footage?
One aspect of how it was shot, well, on the set, people were saying it's a slideshow because there was no movement, but it was like very deliberate, very, very formal. There were a certain amount of one-ers that were actually like walk talks that the camera just moved with the characters as they talked, especially on the streets of New York. But also that combined, so there was definitely a sort of a deliberation that I sort of found within it to give it a certain style of like single one-ers, and then the scenes that had coverage, playing the rhythms of those things against one another, so it never had like an even, so it had hills and valleys and shape. And interestingly, within that context, there were a few scenes that had coverage that were like, oh well, but this one shot, there was one shot, very specific shot where they're talking, where Chris Eigeman and Taylor Nichols are talking about the character Audrey, and she's in the background. You just see her back on this over, and it was just such an interesting shot that, and there was coverage within that scene, that the decision was to keep it just that shot throughout the whole thing, and it gave it a kind of a wonderful mise en scène, and like the fact they were speaking of her, and you saw her, and you felt that, like, it was all that aspect of the gatherings and giving them shape and difference too, like, because there were so many scenes of people in a group talking, sort of saying, so finding that kind of, a certain kind of formality. Well, it was also just like making the words move, the movement of words, the way, having the talk have a rhythm and a flow.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It was dialogue based. And I was from a very visual, I came from an extremely visual point of view. So it was a certain kind of challenge, which I wanted to really make work and have a certain kind of minimal. For one thing, I'm thinking about other films that I had seen in the past that made me kind of think of that kind of formality. Do you know the Eric Romer film, My Night at Maud's?
No, I haven't. No, I don't know.
Beautiful, very beautiful film. Very, very kind of minimal, deliberate, and very, with a lot of clarity as to what the choices are and where to be, but with a lot of breath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's sort of the one thing that really struck me when I watched it for the first time, is just that breath. And I think it just worked so beautifully for the piece. So I think something that sort of really comes out in your work, especially in your sort of early career as well, the sort of projects that you picked have kind of encapsulate a real kind of zeitgeist of a certain time, you know, with Kids, Metropolitan, Gummo. So I was just wondering, is this something that you sought out in particular when you were reading scripts, picking projects, or is this something that just kind of happened with what you were interested in?
I think there's the time and place element to it, in terms of like, well, with Metropolitan, it was so interesting. That was like 1989 is when it was shot. It was released in 1990, but it had that kind of, a little bit of a plutography thing going on, which was very 80s, that kind of Reagan era, like worship of wealth, which, you know, is something that I don't adhere to, but here was this beautiful story that was so well designed, and I tried very much to play down its, if it had any kind of political agenda, and make it much more. And also another thing, remember about Metropolitan, one thing that it introduced me to the world of Jane Austen. My wife I had not read Jane Austen before. My wife was almost in the Jane Austen Society. And so that introduced me, and we had met pretty close to then. And so I was reading a lot of Jane Austen at that time. And just to get that, and that really kind of kicked off the Jane Austen, like, Hollywood thing. I mean, after that, it was like, you know, there were a lot of films that were based on Jane Austen films, but this was new. It was new. It did have a newness. And then Kids, I mean, I loved Larry Clark's work. I mean, I was a huge fan of Larry Clark's work before Kids came in front of me as a possibility to do. And I was very excited to meet with Larry, very, very, and I was really charged, and we clicked. Like, we had, like, aesthetically, there was like a connection, and he recognized that within me, and we talked about a lot of things, and there were things that there were two films that I knew very well already, but that we discussed a lot, just Mikey and Nikki by Elaine May, and Killing of a Chinese Bookie, like John Cassavetes. Yeah. And I would be looking for, actually, within Kids, that I would call them bookie cuts, which is just like finding these really hard, really hard clashes. And that was something very exciting to find within this, like, amazing footage. Eric Edwards was the cinematographer. He did an amazing job. And, you know, it was Larry's teen movie that he, you know, was really, like, dying to do. I mean, I knew was important. Yeah.
So I think, you know, with that as well, like with Kids, a lot of sort of non-actors too, and again, sort of first-time actors. Were there any kind of problems in terms of blocking, or, you know, with the fact that maybe they weren't as experienced? I don't know, like, did that help the energy, or?
Well, it was kind of approached in almost a documentary way, and the shooting, there wasn't kind of classic blocking going on there. It was like loose, and like, actually, I remember the script supervisor was lovely. Her name was Chemi, and she just said, yeah. She just threw her hands up because she knew she had to. There was very little worry about continuity, and jump cuts were a big fun part of it, you know. So I was always looking for ways of not making it smooth, because that wasn't the movie.
Yeah. Okay. So you think that sort of street casting especially really added to that energy?
Absolutely. Yeah. Interestingly, there was an actual actress who was going to be playing the role that Chloe was in. And when Larry brought them all together, she stood out like a sore thumb, and he just made the decision that the hard decision of telling her that, you know, he just didn't think that she was right. And he bumped up Chloe, and Chloe's hair was green at the time, and they had to like dye it.
Okay.
And he discovered Rosario Dawson in the East Village, sitting on her fire escape, 15-year-old girl. And Larry has an amazing eye, and he just said, "You want to be in a movie?"
That's so amazing. So with that sort of energy, obviously you've got the sort of iconic fight scene in the park, and you know, I was wondering in terms of the music choice is so interesting.
Well, that's Daniel Johnston, Casper the Friendly Ghost. That was written in.
Oh, okay. So that's in the script.
That song was absolutely written in, yeah.
Ah, okay. Whilst you were sort of doing the edit then, did you do kind of like a first pass and then add the music, or was it always going to be with that energy?
I always, like, I loved the piece of music, and I kind of, I never go directly and only simply like, oh, I have a piece of music, I'm going to put images on. No, I comb through the footage and try and find all of the most interesting things that I found. And also Larry would like sort of, sometimes he would come in just to like mark like little, like the most kind of cinematic, interesting little things that kind of clicked for him. And I would incorporate a lot of that within the things that I was building as well. And then once I had culled the material that I felt and sort of figured the kind of trajectory of the fight scene and where I felt it was going to, where the sort of the beginning, the middle, and the end were going to be, then I started working with that very specific piece of music and form it.
Yeah. So once you sort of added the music, and that sort of scene in particular was within the sort of context of the whole film, did it change a lot, or was it kind of very similar to that first kind of pass that you did?
Well, as I told you, it evolved from like culling the footage to performing it. So, but it didn't change a lot, no.
Okay, cool. So another sort of sequence I want to talk about is obviously the very iconic sort of opening monologue of Gummo. And was it, again, like, how much footage did you get for that? Like, was there just reams and reams of it, and then was it kind of
reams and reams and reams and reams and reams?
Yeah.
It was like, that was the monologue was written into the script. Number one, with Gummo, as far as the script goes and the movie, I would say the film has about 40 to 50% of the script in it, and almost everything else is like discovered and improvised and utilized. Yeah. One thing that Harmony did at that time during that shoot was hand out high-8 cameras to PAs, and they were going around the area where they were. It's Charleston, Tennessee, and it was an area where, like, it was a very depressed area, and most of the people had done time. Like the kids talking about killing cats, they were just a happenstance. They just happened to trip over those people, and they got so excited about them that they asked them all these questions, and there's this wonderful sequence that built from that. Also, they would go around just shooting things, like they found the dead cat, one kid found a dead dog and threw it off the roof. And that amazing shot of the dog flying over the roof. And there was some amazing stuff, like just like the texture of things were so fantastic. So I just had a field day, and that was more of my origins of
experimental. So you felt kind of quite comfortable going through, like,
I was in heaven. Yeah. And it was interesting too, because I did Gummo directly after doing the People versus Larry Flint, which was like going from boot camp to like a projectile vomit of craziness.
Yeah, that's so cool. So I'm going to jump ahead just because we don't have a lot of time. But I just wanted to talk about Capote, which is obviously it's a personal sort of favorite of mine. And I remember sort of being in the cinema and just like seeing that film and just being so engaged with it from the first kind of scene. And I just think it has such a beautiful rhythm to it, sort of almost poetic. And I just wanted to talk about the execution scene towards the end of the film. And it's so powerful. I just remember it being sort of etched in my mind for such a long time. And I just wondered, you have some use of very like subtle jump cuts in that. Was that something that you did, you know, from your first pass, or again, was that something that evolved later?
I can't say it was in the first pass. In the first pass, I was just sort of like feeling out the shape of things and finding things. What came through in the first pass was the trajectory of like discovering Capote from that shot of his back, which is so amazing, you know, just like the getting the rhythm right to when that reveal happens, because you don't know if he's actually going to go to the exit. So that was like a timing thing that was that had a lot of clarity early on. And then there were a lot of choices of how to deal with the actual execution. We actually got rid of the character who played William Shawn, that was played by Bob Balaban, because we actually digitally removed him from the shot, because he was in the shot with Phil, and it just sort of took it down. So we made it much more stark. That's one actual thing. It's extremely reductive. I mean, our approach to the film, Bennett Miller and myself, was a very, very deliberate, reductive, like austerity to it. And that particular scene, we did like Michael Dana did an amazing score. But in temp music, we didn't have a lot of temp music, and I knew that we really needed something great for the execution. And I was looking, and so actually a music editor that I know helped me find something, and it was a piece from the film Affliction, the Paul Schrader film Affliction, by Michael Block, I believe is the name of the composer, and it was. Or Michael Black, I'm not sure, but it was just fantastic. It was great, and it really helped inform the deliberate aspect of it. And then it didn't literally inform all the jump cuts, but it really worked with that. And we were like so in love with that piece of music. And Michael Dana, our composer, who did some amazing work, hadn't quite gotten that. We were actually thinking we were going to have to buy that piece, but during the mix, like almost like the last 2 days, he composed something that blew it out of the water, and we were finally able to drop it.
Okay. Oh, that's so interesting, the kind of music inform those cuts. So they're so subtle, but like it's really effective.
It's all about that shock.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then obviously the incredible sound design as he kind of drops. And
yes, Ron Bokar, C5 sound design, a great friend and a brilliant artist.
Yeah, incredible. So, you know, touching on Capote, something that I sort of wanted to touch on as well is, do you do a lot of research sort of before you start a film? You know, with something like Capote, obviously, real life sort of character. Like, did you and Bennett kind of have a large research process before, or like was that it just kind of ongoing?
Well, number one, you know, Bennett and I had never met before I started. We had only had one telephone conversation. He contacted me through the work, just from my reputation from the work that I had done, and had one conversation because they shot in Winnipeg in Canada, a 30-day shoot, and I was actually editing at home for the first cut. And yeah, that was really interesting. And then we finally met and started working together, and that wasn't a long edit either. That was like the 7 months, something like that. Altogether. Well, also there was a lot of things. There was another Capote movie that at the time that was like kind of that we, you know, I don't want to go on about it. We prevailed, shall we say?
You definitely prevailed.
I'm not going to.
Yeah. Has there been a film that you've worked on that's kind of really deviated from the original script? And if so, could you tell us a bit about why the film had to be reconstructed? Okay.
Gummo, like partially because the deviation was that there was all this fascinating footage that was just like shot during the time, and then there were like these that whole scene with the wrestling the chair. That was completely improvised.
Okay.
And out of nowhere, that was not in the script. And
yeah.
like I said, I'd say only about 40% of the script left, and I restructured a lot for that, and that was actually a very tight edit. It was very interesting with Gummo. I never wanted to overwork it. It was an 11-week cut. Cut it in 11 weeks.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, there was a lot of footage too, but it was like, I really kind of just like reacted. It was like a reactive thing.
Yeah.
And
Just
I never ever wanted it to not feel fresh, you know?
Yeah, just that sort of visceral reaction to that kind of incredible improv as well, which you see throughout. And I think it sort of adds as well to like how special that film is, because again, it is that sort of just real gut reaction. And
it's totally mad, you know?
Yeah. So has there been a project where you've read the script and you've just been so blown away by the script, you kind of thought, yes, I like must absolutely work on this project? And
Totally.
Okay, interesting. So
Yeah.
what about the script?
So I knew it was Phil Hoffman's moment. I knew it was his moment, and I wanted to be a part of that.
So obviously you, from what you're saying, you started afterwards, so you already knew he was attached, like when Bennett came to you with the project?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. So what about the script do you think gave you that reaction? Was it just the quality of the writing, or the character?
It was the quality of the writing, and the fact that it was like, I think that, you know, it was interesting because biographical films are very interesting. I've done actually quite a few, and there's something about that was just that peace and time, and was just fascinating to me. And then interestingly, that makes me think of some of the structuring of it. The time factor was a struggle in a good way, in an interesting way, because there's like that whole aspect of when he's waiting for them to die. He's literally waiting for them to die, and it's driving him crazy because he can't finish it until he does. And also the whole aspect of like, this is the beginning of the end. Like, and he was quoted, Truman Capote was quoting to say, when he went to Kansas and if he knew what was going to happen, what he was going to face, he would have run the other way. But it was the beginning of an end. It was a pinnacle and a nosedive down.
Yeah.
And it's tragedy. I found very poignant and very beautiful.
Yeah, so interesting. So with talking about sort of the importance of the script, I wanted to touch on sort of Aaron Sorkin's writing in regards to sort of Moneyball. And how does the rhythm of Sorkin's kind of writing dictate to the edit? Do you find there's more or less kind of freedom there?
Oh, well, Moneyball was, you know, like it had quite an evolution script-wise. The original script was written by Steven Zaillian, and it was originally going to be shot by Steven Soderbergh. One year before we actually started the actual film, Amy Pascal at Sony Pictures pulled it from that production, with the Steven Soderbergh production, and then they brought on Aaron Sorkin. They brought on the producer, Scott Rudin, and then they brought on Bennett Miller. And then Bennett brought me on, and that sort of evolved. And I think Aaron did some wonderful, wonderful work with it. He brought the daughter character in, and the daughter character became very important, extremely important. It was really wonderful. But I would say, as far as dictating, you know, a certain scenes, like the scout scene, my very favorite scene, it's 40% improv.
Yeah.
And talk about non-actors, half of those actors were real scouts. Like there was one guy, the Ancient Mariner, who worked with Mariners, this like 90-year-old guy with the earpiece, who talks about God. That was all improvisation. It was just like, it was gold. It was amazing. And also thinking about how it was shot. I mean, Wally Pfister, who shot it, and he's a very dramatic cinematographer, and here he is faced with like with fluorescent lights and like 20 old guys.
Yeah.
How's he shoot this? And he and his other operator, they did it very, very documentary style. And also what we gravitated towards were all the raking shots. There's very few straight ons and very few overs. They're almost all these raking profiles that move. And they're just, they're superb. They're so beautiful. And, it's so strange. And you just see like liver spots and like, and it's film too. It's film. So the liver spots really look great with the grain of the liver spots and wrinkles. It was,
I know.
Fired.
Well, I just cut a short film on film, and it honestly, like the texture, it makes a huge difference. Like I wasn't even expecting it to make.
Cody was shot on film.
Yeah.
Shot on film. A Quiet Place was shot on film.
Oh, really? I didn't actually know that.
Oh, you can see. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. So, sort of touching on A Quiet Place, obviously that was, quite recent. And I sort of wondered, from your perspective, what attracted you to that project? It's obviously a new writer-director. Was it the script? Was it John? Like, what kind of attracted you to that?
It was definitely the concept. I was fascinated by the concept. And also, I think Emily Blunt is a brilliant actress. And Millie, the young woman, the deaf actress, she's amazing. And I had seen the film that she was, Todd Haynes' film, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it, that was before that. And I just thought she was so interesting. And the whole concept of sound being what the base of their fear and their trepidation and the whole, I just thought it was very, very smart and interesting concept and I thought the script was very well done. It was, originally John was asked to be in it. He wasn't asked originally to direct it, but when he read the other script, then he just said, I really would like to direct this. And then he got his wife onto it too. And he did a lot of rewriting, some very interesting stuff. I think that there was what also attracted me to it was a horror film that had this incredibly strong base of a family that you believed in and you cared about, and it made it so much more, it just jacked up it made it more important in its way. And also I love the fact that, like it was like there's a certain interesting thing of the sexism of it, of what he takes the boy who's scared to death, he takes with him, and the girl is brave and wants to go, and he like kind of pushes her back and says, stay with your mother, kind of thing. And then the mother and the girl prevail, and that just getting to that end shot of Emily doing the gun, it was like getting to that, and the girl, using her weapon, which was the speaker, going to 11. It was a wonderful concept, and obviously, it played well for people, and people really responded to it.
Yeah, I think especially with the sort of the sound aspect, when I saw it in the cinema, it was just everyone was on sort of a nightmare.
And interestingly, the mix was brilliant, and E Squared was the name of the company that ended up doing the sound, and they did a fantastic job. And we were under a great deal of pressure time-wise with that film. I mean, it was like 6 months from the first day of shooting to like showing it at South by Southwest, and it was like, it was, like it was a blur. I can barely remember, that. And the mix was fast-ish. Wasn't even 2 weeks, and we were preparing it for South by Southwest, and it played so well at South by Southwest that we didn't go do a lot of go backs.
Okay, yeah, I think it's so like
we're with something that was working.
Yeah, especially what you're saying about family. I think in terms of like horror genre, like that the stakes are just so much higher when you care about a family like that. Yeah,
so much higher, and just with the like just opening with that child being taken away, it's just so horrifying, and your worst fear, and the whole aspect of Emily, like, well, Emily's so amazing, you could watch her in labor for hours. She's so fascinating, but the whole thing of like her giving birth, it's just so great. It's great.
Yeah. So we're sort of running a little bit of time for questions. So I just want to ask a couple of questions relating to sort of new kind of directors, because a lot of people on this will sort of be part of BFI Network, up and coming sort of writer directors. So I just sort of wanted to touch on, like, what do you think a sort of up and coming director should look for when they're kind of picking an editor to hire?
Oh, taste, instinct, you know, simpatico ideas, you know, like just like how they respond to your script and what they have, you feel they project or offer, or get an idea of what that they're on board with something and have a lot to give and a lot to add.
Okay, yeah. And I think, you know, a lot of focus, especially now everything is digital, is a lot on the sort of technology side of editing. And I've always come at it from like a very creative, I've always been interested in storytelling. And I just sort of wanted to touch on that. I think it's really important for young editors to look at the sort of creative side of the storytelling as opposed to learning the technology. And I just sort of wondered, is there any sort of advice you'd give on, you know, say for instance, if you don't have a short film to edit and you're kind of getting ready to take that leap, like what kinds of things can young editors do? Like, read books? Like, what kind of thing would you suggest?
Absolutely. Read, watch great films, and even watch bad films. You learn from bad films too. And just like immerse yourself. Truly immerse yourself. I mean, sometimes I get inspiration from just like going and looking at a painting, or, you know, you just find a way to, you know, satisfy your creative soul and project into what you want to bring. It's tough because, you know, editing, you have to edit. So it's like a little hard to say, but as far as inspiration goes, I think I get a lot from reading, a lot.
I think also for me, especially like when I first started out, reading loads of scripts really helped me kind of understand that. And then you can find them online, and then you can kind of go and watch them.
I was thinking more like novels. You learn a lot from novels. I read a lot of Nabokov early on, and that kind of was inspiring.
I think reading just any kind of story really, really helps. And novels especially. I think this time has actually been quite good because I've sort of got back into reading loads of books, and it's been really actually quite exciting to sort of go back and
really. We're doing here at home, we're reading the Brontes. We read Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, and I just enjoyed them so much. Now we want to read something by Anne Bronte.
I might go back and read Wide Sargasso Sea. I love that book.
Oh yes, and I love Jean Rees.
She's amazing. She's one of my favorites. So I'm just going to go some questions. So I'm just having a look through. Okay, so. So this is an interesting one. So how did you find the transition from traditional sort of film editing to heavy kind of visual effects editing in Assassin's Creed?
Oh, that's really interesting. It's a different kind of challenge, you know? It was like with Assassin's Creed, well, interestingly, there was no story. So it was action. So, you know, you have to make the action exciting and fun, you know, and however you can get that going, you know. So I'd say it's, you know, and formally, like, action is like experimental film. You're just like making it crazy, and you're trying to find ways to make it, you know, exciting and fun.
Yeah, I remember the wagon chase you were for a very long time. Just hearing the noises coming from your room like 24 hours a day. It's like Fassbender.
It's not like I found it a challenge that was interesting, and I enjoyed it, and I was drawn to Assassin's Creed because of Justin Kurzel. I really loved his film, The Snowtown Murders.
Snowtown is incredible.
Snowtown is amazing. It's the most violent, horrific movie I've ever seen. and just
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah,
So
and the score from Jed as well, amazing.
Actually, you know what? I have to tell you something. You have to see. There's a podcast called Blank Check, and these guys who watch movies, and they have an amazing one about Assassin's Creed. It's really funny. They look at it as like this insane experimental film, and that's exactly what
it was though. Yeah.
An expensive, big ass experimental.
Very expensive indeed.
We could do a whole thing on that ourselves, right?
Yeah.
But we should keep that to ourselves.
Yeah, let's keep that till after the chat. So I'm just going through. Okay, so do you prefer editing big studio features or kind of smaller independent films? Is there a big difference to you, or?
Well, I'll tell you this much. The beauty of small films is freedom. Once you start making films that cost upward of $50 million and have big stars in them and have too many producers giving you notes, that's a whole other ball of wax. You know, it's different. I mean, I've navigated it well, considering, but I love the challenge of I really like making like exciting and really good large studio movies. I enjoy, but I'd say, yeah, my passion is definitely with the smaller films, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
Another question here. Have there been points in your career where you feel like your skills as an editor took a big step forward? If so, what were the kind of light bulb moments that made these kind of fall into place for you?
I would say with like my first like real feature, even though it was a small film, Metropolitan, it was like the sense of responsibility and the sense of seeing this through to what I felt was as good as it humanly possibly could be. That was like a thing. And then I'd had to adhere that kind of focus and that kind of dedication to everything I touched.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, this is an interesting one. Have you ever been involved in script changes during pre-production?
Oh, that's a good question. Not a lot, but definitely I'd have to really like scour for that. It's interesting. In a way, I'm a collagist and assemblist. I work with found things, you know what I'm saying? And in a way, I don't get that involved pre-time with scripts. I've had discussions about things, you know, and especially like looking at and reading, but I'm sorry, I'm a little clotted on this. You may want to go to the next question.
Okay, I'll go to the next one. So what do you look for in an assistant editor when you're hiring an assistant editor?
Someone who's extremely capable in doing the things that I need them to do, which are the technical aspects, which I kind of don't cloud my own mind with. But beyond that, I really do look for someone who has taste and who has, you know, passion, and who I can always bounce things off of. I always, as soon as I do a first pass of things, I always draw my assistants in and get reactions and feedback, and that's extremely important to me.
Yeah. I mean, for me, working on Assassin's Creed with you was kind of a real amazing experience, because, you know, you really trusted what we would bring to the table when we were looking at like the first kind of assemblies and all that kind of stuff. And that's, you know, sometimes can be quite rare, and it just makes you feel as an assistant, you know, really involved in the project.
Yeah, I mean, that it should be, you know, a camaraderie and an idea of like, you know, like we're all in this together, and, you know, I want someone whose opinions I value.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think it just makes you, like I said, just makes you feel like collaborative, and having discussions with you, and if you hadn't have done that, maybe we wouldn't have had a discourse and realized we had like a lot of interest in common with art and like things like that. And I just think that communication can be really, really key with editor and assistant. And I think the role has changed a lot in terms of it being sort of a very technology approach. But what I love about the job is when I'm involved in the kind of more sort of creative aspects. Yeah.
And that's what I'm in it for.
Yeah, exactly. Storytelling.
A bit of a Luddite.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna
stop me.
Yeah. Okay, so here's another question. So go on, please. Just to get us through lockdown, tell us something about the Many Saints of Newark. Just a tease.
I'm afraid I can't really say much. I mean, our release date has been moved, which is a drag.
Yeah.
That's in March now.
Mm-hmm.
And we won't be able to get back in for a little while. So I actually was talking to David Chase yesterday. He's in LA and he's bored.
Like everyone else.
Yes. But it's wonderful, and there's like Michael Gandolfini is going to be a real wonderful surprise to people.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, a lot of people are very excited.
I think it's an exciting performance.
Yeah.
Alessandro Nivola. I mean, I could go on, but I'm gonna hold back.
Yeah, hold back. So I'm just gonna go to maybe one more question. So I'm just gonna have a look through. Do you have a particular genre of film you like to edit more than others? How does your approach change from different genres or styles?
I have kind of a love of everything, and it's interesting. I've done two real out and out comedies. And Metropolitan in its way is a comedy of manners, but like Flirting with Disaster is an out and out comedy, and so is Analyze This is an out and out comedy. And I really, really enjoyed that. It was interesting after doing those two films, because they were kind of back to back, I got all these comedy scripts coming to me, and they were all terrible. And I couldn't, I was like, no, I don't think so, kind of a thing. But I love drama, I love comedy, and I have an appreciation for, I was very curious about like big visual effects movie, but I was satisfied with A Quiet Place because it had substance and it was worth it,
Yeah. Okay. And then
I embrace many things, but maybe like in essence, like my real origins are an experimental.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think also what makes an amazing editor is that you can do those different genres, right? Like
it's so fun to be able to like not just do one thing,
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. I did try hard not to be pigeonholed.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because as filmmakers, you can be pigeonholed really early on in your career. And I think
and as editors too.
Yeah, definitely. What's so great about your career is the amount of different sort of genres that you've managed to do, and even like documentaries too. Not many people.
I had a great time with the documentary.
Yeah, but actually, I suppose all that footage from Gummo and stuff, that's kind of
and in essence, stylistically certain aspects of kids.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just one more question from me, which I'm interested in your thoughts. Which directors do you sort of that are up and coming at the moment do you find quite exciting?
I really, really love Yorgos Lanthimos. I think he's fantastic, but he's not really an up and comer. I love the Safdie brothers, and I loved Midsummer. That's Ari Aster. I thought that was extraordinary. It was really
amazing.
So inventive and odd and new. I was very impressed with that.
Okay, cool. All right, well, thank you so much, Chris. It's been awesome.
Well, always a pleasure, Rachel.
Okay, all right, well, thanks everyone, and speak soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.